We're counting down the 15 British desserts your nans used to make. Puddings that brought sweetness to tables still marked by rationing, cold kitchens, and careful budgets, but today have all but vanished from British homes. From wobbly milk puddings that cost mere pennies to make, to elaborate steamed creations that crowned the Sunday table, each entry tells the story of thrift, ingenuity, and the small moments of joy carved out of post-war austerity. Expect forgotten textures, controversial school dinner memories, and flavors that conjure the scent of Nan's kitchen in an instant. Which lost pudding claims the top spot? Let's begin our countdown with number 15. Number 15. Semolina pudding divided Britain's schoolchildren like no other dessert. That pale, porridge-like mass, ladled into bowls across thousands of canteens, earned loyalty and loathing in equal measure. By the mid-1950s, school meal records show semolina featured on rotation in nearly every local authority kitchen. Its low cost, just a few pence per serving, making it the accountant's dream and the fussy eater's nightmare. Housewives too stirred the fine wheat granules into simmering milk at home, sweetening the pot with a spoonful of sugar and perhaps a scrape of nutmeg when rations allowed. The texture was the sticking point. Some craved the smooth, creamy warmth, spooning up every last trace with contentment. Others recoiled at the faint graininess, the skin that formed if the pudding sat too long, the way it clung to the roof of the mouth. Diaries from the era record the weekly ordeal. One entry read, "Semolina again." Harold refused and went to bed hungry. A dollop of jam, crimson and glistening, was the standard rescue, swirled through the middle or pooled in a sticky island at the center of the bowl. Ministry of Food leaflets praised semolina as economical and nourishing, a dessert that stretched the milk ration and filled small stomachs without fuss. For children of the 1950s and the 1960s, the memory of semolina is inseparable from the clatter of school dining halls and the stern gaze of dinner ladies who tolerated no waste. Today, it has vanished from most kitchens, surviving only in care homes and the occasional nostalgic revival. Yet for a generation, semolina pudding was the taste of making do, plain, filling, and impossible to forget. Tapioca pudding earned a nickname that haunted school dining halls across Britain: frog spawn. Those small translucent pearls suspended in sweetened milk bore an uncanny resemblance to something at the edge of a garden pond, and children made sure no one forgot it. By 1958, tapioca imports from Southeast Asia had made the starch cheap enough for institutional kitchens, where it was boiled in vast quantities and served with the efficiency of a factory line. The texture was the thing. Slippery, gelatinous, almost squeaky between the teeth, tapioca inspired shudders and giggles in equal measure. Housewives also made it at home, following recipes handed down from mothers who remembered tapioca as a wartime staple, a dessert that stretched the milk ration and asked little of the larder. Oral histories recall the ritual, the slow simmer, the patient stirring to prevent sticking, the moment when the pearls turned from chalky white to glassy and soft. Some people added a spoonful of jam or a dusting of cinnamon, hoping to distract from the pudding's alien appearance. Children poked at their bowls, daring one another to swallow without chewing, while mothers insisted it was good for digestion and would not be wasted. School dinner registers from the 1960s show tapioca appearing at least twice a month, its presence met with groans that echoed off tiled walls. Today, tapioca has staged a modest comeback in bubble tea shops, but the milky, wobbly pudding of Nan's kitchen is all but extinct. Its memory lingers as proof that post-war Britain found sweetness wherever it could, even in a bowl of frog spawn. Junket was the gentlest of puddings, a set milk dessert so delicate It seemed to tremble at the touch of a spoon. Housewives warmed fresh milk just above blood temperature, stirred in a few drops of rennet, the enzyme that curdled cheese, and watched as the liquid set into something soft, cool, and faintly sweet. By the early 1950s, packets of flavored rennet powder lined grocers' shelves, promising strawberry pink or vanilla white junkets with minimal effort. The National Dairy Council promoted Junket as the ideal nursery food, easy on young stomachs and light enough for invalids recovering from illness. Its texture sat somewhere between custard and blancmange, lacking the wobble of jelly but softer than anything baked. Children spooned it up with barely a chew, the cool sweetness dissolving almost before it reached the throat. Mothers served Junket in glass dishes, sometimes with a grating of nutmeg or a scattering of hundreds and thousands, turning the pale surface into something festive. Oral histories recall the ritual of waiting. Junket could not be rushed, and a knock to the table before it set meant disaster. Diaries from the era speak of Junket as the reward for a day spent poorly. One diary entry reads, "Gave Doris Junket and a lie down. She perked up by tea time." As the decades passed and supermarket shelves filled with yogurts and mousses, Junket slipped quietly from the national memory. Rennet tablets became harder to find, and the patience required to set a proper Junket seemed out of step with modern kitchens. Today, it survives mostly in the West Country, and in the fond recollections of those who remember its cool, mild comfort. Junket was never glamorous, but it was kindness in a bowl. Number 12. Blancmange wobbled its way through post-war Britain as the centerpiece of children's parties and modest Sunday teas. That pastel-colored mound, turned out from a fluted mold and quivering at the slightest movement, became the emblem of homemade celebration when little else was on offer. By 1955, powdered blancmange mixes from Bird's and Brown and Polson cost just a few pence a packet, making them the affordable answer to every birthday and bank holiday. Housewives dissolved the powder in milk, stirred patiently over a low flame, and poured the mixture into molds greased with a whisper of butter or margarine. The wait was agony for children, who pressed noses to the larder door and asked every 10 minutes if it was ready. When the blancmange finally emerged, rabbit-shaped for Easter, fluted for Sunday best, it shimmered under the kitchen light, its surface catching the glow like something almost magical. The flavors were simple: strawberry pink, chocolate brown, vanilla white. The texture was smooth and yielding, cold against the tongue, and just firm enough to hold its shape before collapsing at the touch of a spoon. Oral histories recall the excitement of the unmolding, the collective breath held as mothers tipped the dish and prayed the blancmange would release in one piece. Failures were quietly scraped into bowls and served as broken blancmange, dignity intact. Today, blancmange has all but disappeared from British tables, its place taken by mousses, panna cottas, and supermarket trifles. Yet for those who remember, the sight of a wobbling pink mold still conjures the taste of childhood, sweet, simple, and impossible to recreate. Number 11. Cornflake tart was the undisputed queen of the school dinner pudding trolley, a creation so beloved that dinner ladies guarded the corner pieces with the vigilance of sentries. Short crust pastry, pressed into battered baking trays, was spread with a slick of strawberry jam before being topped with a sticky mixture of golden syrup and crushed cornflakes. By the 1960s, school meal records show cornflake tart appearing on menus from Cornwall to the Scottish borders, its low cost and easy preparation making it a favorite of canteen kitchens working to strict budgets. The magic happened in the oven, where the syrup bubbled and the cornflakes turned golden and chewy, their edges catching just enough heat to crisp. Children jostled for position in the queue, eyes fixed on the trolley, hoping for a slab with extra jam or a corner where the syrup had pooled and caramelized. The taste was unapologetically sweet, sticky, crunchy, and satisfying in a way that defied explanation. Served with a ladleful of lurid pink custard, Cornflake tart became the reward for enduring grey mince and watery cabbage. Oral histories recall the bartering system that sprang up around it. "I'll swap you my cornflake tart for your chocolate sponge." "No?" "Didn't think so." At home, mothers replicated the recipe for birthday teas and Saturday treats, pressing leftover pastry into dishes and letting children stir the syrup. Today, cornflake tart has vanished from most schools and kitchens, its memory preserved in reunion conversations and the occasional retro bakery. For a generation, it was proof that joy could be conjured from the humblest of store-cupboard ingredients. Number 10. Chocolate concrete earned its name with brutal honesty. That slab of dense, almost tooth-cracking sponge, soaked in a thin chocolate sauce and served in school canteens across Britain, became the stuff of playground legend. By the late 1960s, dinner ladies had perfected the art of baking trays of the stuff, so firm it could survive the roughest handling, so chocolatey it forgave every sin. The secret, passed down through generations of canteen cooks, lay in the ratio of flour to cocoa and the long, slow bake that drove out moisture and left behind something closer to fudge than cake. Children learned quickly that chocolate concrete required commitment. The first bite met resistance, the second released a wave of deep, bitter-sweet cocoa, and by the third, the jaw began to ache. Served with a pool of vivid pink or mint green custard, chocolate concrete became the ultimate test of devotion. Oral histories recall the ritual. You did not chew it, you let it melt. It took half of lunchtime, but it was worth every second. School meal registers from the 1970s show chocolate concrete as a weekly fixture, its presence announced by the unmistakable scent of cocoa drifting from kitchen vents. Attempts to recreate it at home often failed. Too soft, too crumbly, never quite right. The real thing required industrial ovens and the institutional alchemy only dinner ladies possessed. Today, chocolate concrete survives in memory and in the occasional nostalgic recipe blog, but the original, served on compartmentalized plastic trays beside lumpy mash, has passed into legend. For those who knew it, chocolate concrete was more than a pudding. It was an endurance event and a badge of school dinner survival. Manchester tart arrived at the table as a proud regional answer to the question of what to do with jam, coconut, and a bit of leftover pastry. Short crust pastry lined the tin, spread with a layer of raspberry jam, then topped with a sweet custard filling, finished with a snowfall of desiccated coconut and a glaced cherry perched at the center like a jewel. By the 1950s, Manchester tart had become a staple of bakery windows across the Northwest, its bright white coconut topping and crimson cherry drawing the eye of every passing child. Housewives made it at home for Sunday tea, using recipes clipped from women's magazines or passed down from mothers who remembered it as a treat for special occasions. The taste was layered, the crunch of coconut, the sweetness of jam, the smooth, eggy custard beneath. Oral histories recall the ritual of slicing, each portion carefully cut to ensure everyone got a fair share of cherry. Diaries from the era speak of Manchester tart as the reward for good behavior, the centerpiece of birthday spreads, the thing children asked for when given the choice. School canteens adopted it too, serving thick slabs alongside jugs of custard, though purists insisted the bakery version was always superior. As supermarket desserts multiplied and regional recipes faded, Manchester tart slipped from prominence. Today, it survives in a handful of traditional bakeries and in the memories of those who grew up with its coconut sweetness. For many, Manchester tart is the taste of the Northwest, a modest pudding that punched above its weight and never pretended to be anything other than what it was. Number 8. Gypsy tart was the Kent coast's answer to the craving for something impossibly sweet. That open tart, its filling a deep caramel brown whipped from just 2 ingredients, evaporated milk and dark muscovado sugar, became the signature pudding of school canteens from Chatham to Canterbury. By the 1960s, Gypsy tart had spread beyond Kent, appearing on menus as far afield as Essex and Sussex, though locals insisted only a proper Kentish kitchen could get the texture right. The secret lay in the whipping. Evaporated milk, chilled overnight, was beaten with muscovado sugar until the mixture turned pale, mousse-like, and almost doubled in volume. Poured into a blind-baked pastry case and set in the fridge, Gypsy tart emerged with a filling so light it seemed to dissolve on the tongue, leaving behind a rush of treacly sweetness. Children scraped their plates clean, then ran fingers around the edges to catch every last trace. Oral histories recall the anticipation. People remembered that you could smell the sugar from the corridor, and everyone hoped it was Gypsy tart day. The origins of the name remain disputed. Some say it was invented to feed hungry traveler children. Others say the dark filling simply looked the part. Whatever the truth, Gypsy tart became a point of local pride, defended fiercely against imitators. Today it survives in a handful of Kentish bakeries and in the kitchens of those who remember its unique, sugary magic. For a generation of Kent schoolchildren, Gypsy tart was proof that 2 simple ingredients could create something unforgettable. Number 7. Bread pudding was the thrifty baker's answer to the problem of stale loaves piling up in the bread bin. Not to be confused with its more refined cousin, bread and butter pudding, this dense, spiced slab was built for substance, not elegance. Housewives soaked stale bread in milk or cold tea, squeezed out the excess, then mixed in sugar, suet, dried fruit, and a generous shake of mixed spice. By the 1950s, bread pudding had become a fixture of bakery counters and market stalls, sold by the square and wrapped in greaseproof paper for workers seeking something filling between meals. The texture was the thing, heavy, moist, almost cake-like, with currants and sultanas studding every bite. A dusting of caster sugar on top added sweetness, while the spice gave warmth that lingered long after the last crumb was gone. Oral histories recall the ritual of making bread pudding at home, children watching as mothers transformed a week's worth of crusts into something worth fighting over. Diaries from the era speak of bread pudding as the reward for lean weeks. Nothing left but bread ends. Made pudding? Boys didn't complain. Served warm with custard or cold with a cup of tea, bread pudding was the taste of making do. Today it survives in a handful of traditional bakeries and in the kitchens of those who remember the satisfaction of wasting nothing. Bread pudding was never fashionable, but it was honest, a dessert that turned scarcity into something solid and sweet. Eve's pudding brought the comfort of stewed apples and sponge together in a dish that felt like autumn in a bowl. Housewives layered sliced cooking apples, sharp and tangy, into buttered baking dishes, sprinkled with sugar and sometimes a squeeze of lemon, then topped the lot with a simple Victoria sponge batter. By the early 1950s, Eve's pudding had become a staple of the home kitchen, a way to use up windfall apples from the garden or cheap Bramleys from the market. The National Food Survey recorded that British households consumed, on average, nearly 2 pounds of apples per person each week, and Eve's pudding was one of the most popular ways to put them to use. The magic happened in the oven, where the apples softened and released their juices, soaking into the sponge above, while the top turned golden and rose into a light, cakey crust. The scent that filled the kitchen was unmistakable: warm fruit, butter, and the faint sweetness of vanilla. Children hovered near the oven door, waiting for the moment when the pudding was declared ready. Served with a jug of hot custard poured generously over each portion, Eve's pudding was the antidote to grey afternoons and early darkness. Oral histories recall the quiet satisfaction of scraping the dish clean, the way the tartness of the apple cut through the sweetness of the sponge. Today, Eve's pudding has faded from most kitchens, replaced by crumbles and ready-made tarts. But for those who remember, it remains the taste of home, a simple pudding that asked for nothing more than apples, flour, and a little patience. Number 5. Cabinet pudding was the elegant cousin of the bread pudding, a steamed creation that graced the Sunday table when something a little more refined was called for. Sponge fingers or slices of stale cake were layered in a buttered basin with dried fruit, sultanas, currants, candied peel, then soaked in a rich custard of eggs and milk before being steamed for hours until set. By the 1950s, cabinet pudding had earned its place in Women's Institute cookery books and Ministry of Food pamphlets as a model of thrifty elegance, a way to transform leftovers into something worthy of guests. The name itself hinted at grandeur, though the origins remained obscure. Some claimed it was named for the cabinet rooms of Parliament, others for the glass-fronted cabinets where fine china was displayed. What mattered was the result: a golden domed pudding turned out onto a plate, its surface studded with fruit and glistening with residual steam. The texture was soft, custardy, and yielding, each slice revealing a mosaic of sponge and currants. Served with a pool of hot custard or a drizzle of jam sauce, cabinet pudding was the reward for patience and planning. Oral histories recall the ritual of the unmolding, the held breath as the basin was inverted, the cheer when the pudding slid free in one piece. Diaries from the era speak of cabinet pudding as the mark of a capable cook, and one entry says that the cook made cabinet pudding for the Reverend, and he asked for seconds. Today it has all but vanished from British kitchens, its place taken by quicker, simpler desserts. But for a generation, cabinet pudding was proof that even stale cake could be redeemed. Number 4. Sussex pond pudding was the most dramatic of the steamed suet puddings, a golden dome hiding a secret that astonished anyone who cut into it for the first time. A whole lemon, pricked all over with a skewer, was encased in sweet pastry along with butter and demerara sugar, then steamed for hours until the pastry turned pale and tender, and the filling became a sticky, citrus-sharp pond of buttery sauce. By the 1950s, Sussex pond pudding had earned a place in the canon of traditional British cookery, though its origins stretched back centuries to the farmhouse kitchens of the South Downs. The drama came at the table. When the pudding was cut open, the molten butter and sugar spilled out, pooling on the plate and mingling with the soft, almost marmalade-like lemon at the center. The taste was intense. Sweet, sour, and rich in equal measure, the suet pastry soaking up the sauce and softening to something almost silky. Oral histories recall the gasps of delight, the competition for the pieces closest to the lemon, the way the sauce demanded to be mopped up with every last scrap of crust. Ministry of Food pamphlets from the era praised Sussex pond pudding as a model of ingenuity, turning cheap ingredients into a centerpiece. Today, it survives mostly in cookery books and the kitchens of dedicated revivalists. The patience required, 3 hours of steaming minimum, has put it beyond the reach of most modern schedules. But for those who remember, Sussex pond pudding was the taste of anticipation, a pudding that rewarded waiting with a flood of golden, citrus-scented sweetness. Number 3. Gooseberry fool was the taste of early summer, a simple dessert that captured the fleeting tartness of the British gooseberry season. Housewives stewed green gooseberries with sugar until soft, then folded the cooled fruit through whipped cream or custard to create something light, sharp, and deeply refreshing. By the 1950s, gooseberry fool had become a fixture of the June table, appearing at garden parties, Sunday lunches, and Women's Institute gatherings across the country. The National Food Survey recorded that gooseberry consumption peaked in the post-war years, when allotments and back gardens overflowed with the spiny bushes that thrived in British soil. The texture of a proper fool was ethereal, the cream billowing and soft, the fruit adding pockets of tartness that cut through the richness. Some cooks left the gooseberries chunky, others pressed them through a sieve for a smoother finish. The color ranged from pale green to blushing pink, depending on the variety and the ripeness of the fruit. Oral histories recall the ritual of picking gooseberries, fingers pricked by thorns, buckets filled for jam and fool alike. Diaries from the era speak of gooseberry fool as the reward for patience. First gooseberries ready, made fool, gone in minutes. Served in glass dishes to show off its marbled beauty, gooseberry fool was the embodiment of seasonal eating. Today, gooseberries themselves have become a rarity, and the fool has faded with them. For those who remember, it remains the taste of a British summer, sharp, sweet, and all too brief. Number 2. Queen of Puddings stood as the crown jewel of the thrifty kitchen, a layered dessert that transformed stale breadcrumbs into something fit for royalty. A base of breadcrumbs soaked in sweetened vanilla-scented milk was baked until just set, then spread with a layer of raspberry or strawberry jam and topped with a billowing meringue, browned in the oven until golden and crisp. By the 1950s, Queen of Puddings had earned its place in every home cook's repertoire, praised by Ministry of Food leaflets as a model of economy and elegance. The National Food Survey recorded that households routinely saved stale bread for puddings, and Queen of Puddings was among the most beloved ways to use it. The taste was a study in contrasts, the soft custardy base giving way to the sharp sweetness of jam, then the cloud-like crunch of meringue. Children fought for the corners where the meringue had caught the most color, while mothers took quiet pride in a well-risen top. Oral histories recall the ritual of making Queen of Puddings for special occasions, birthdays, Easter, the arrival of guests. Diaries from the era speak of the anticipation. One diary reads, "Made Queen of Puddings." Everyone watched the oven and held their breath until the meringue was just right. The name itself carried a sense of occasion, elevating a humble pudding to something worthy of celebration. Today, Queen of Puddings has faded from most kitchens, its place taken by simpler desserts and supermarket trifles. But for a generation, it was proof that grandeur could be conjured from crumbs, a fitting tribute to the resourcefulness of the post-war kitchen. And finally, in first place, the proper sherry trifle crowned every celebration in post-war Britain, a towering confection that turned Sunday lunch into an event and birthdays into something truly memorable. Layers of sponge, often Swiss roll sliced and arranged to show its spiral, were soaked in sweet sherry until soft and boozy, then topped with fruit, rich egg, custard, and a final flourish of whipped cream. By the 1950s, trifle had become the undisputed queen of the British dessert table, appearing at Christmas, christenings, and any gathering where impressions mattered. Ministry of Food pamphlets offered recipes for economy trifle, stretching sponge and custard as far as possible, but the real thing demanded generosity, a heavy hand with the sherry, a deep layer of bird's custard made from scratch, and cream whipped to soft peaks. The ritual of assembly was as important as the eating. Mothers worked in stages, building the trifle in glass bowls that showed off every layer, finishing with a scattering of flaked almonds or crystallized violets. The bowl was carried to the table with ceremony, a hush falling as the serving spoon broke through the cream and descended into the depths. Oral histories recall the anticipation. Nan's trifle was the only reason we behaved at Christmas. That first spoonful, all sherry and cream, was worth every church sermon. Diaries from the era speak of trifle as the mark of a proper celebration. No trifle, no party. Children begged for extra cream, adults lingered over the sherry-soaked sponge, and the empty bowl was scraped clean before it reached the kitchen. As the decades passed, trifle became a casualty of changing tastes. Supermarket versions, pallid and artificial, replaced the homemade original, and sherry itself fell from favor. Today, the proper sherry trifle is a rarity, surviving in the hands of grandmothers who remember its power to transform an ordinary gathering into an occasion. For a generation, trifle was more than a dessert. It was proof that celebration could be built from simple ingredients, layered with care, and shared with those who mattered most. The last spoonful was always bittersweet, a reminder that the best things, like the moments they marked, could never quite last long enough. Across all 15 entries, from the humble semolina pudding that opened our list to the triumphant sherry trifle at the very top, these forgotten British desserts tell a powerful story of thrift, creativity, and the small joys that sweetened even the hardest times. Some, like chocolate concrete and cornflake tart, stand as monuments to the ingenuity of school dinner ladies, while others, such as gooseberry fool and Sussex pond pudding, reveal the deep connection between British puddings and the seasons that shaped them. The common thread throughout is resourcefulness. Stale bread, cheap milk, windfall fruit, and a willingness to make something special from almost nothing. Suet, custard, and a generous hand with jam recur in nearly every recipe, underscoring how necessity shaped the national sweet tooth. This ranking is not just about what disappeared from our kitchens, but what these desserts represent. The warmth of Nan's kitchen, the anticipation of pudding after a plain meal, and the deep cultural memory baked into every steaming bowl and wobbling mold. In the end, these 15 lost puddings are more than recipes. They are the taste of a generation that endured, adapted, and against the odds, found moments of sweetness around the table.